Our story begins in a world where day and night alternate every 30 minutes. During the night, the monsters emerge to hunt. By day, they return to their human forms, but if the light is insufficient, even during the daylight hours, the monsters appear anyway, such as the rule of the slaughter between day and night. But Lin Xun, sleeping peacefully in his dormitory, had no idea that a catastrophic change had already occurred outside. In the middle of the night, he suddenly woke up. The smell of blood mixed with rot was spreading throughout the room. Furthermore, the sound of someone chewing reached his ears. Crack, crack. He looked toward the source of the sound and could only see a silhouette on the opposite bed. It was leaning over the bed, and he couldn't tell what it was eating. He could no longer bear the smell, which was growing more intense by the second. Instinctively, he asked, "Sumin, what are you eating?" Suddenly, a terrible feeling washed over him, but before he could even think, a massive black shadow lunged at him. Immediately afterward, everything went dark before his eyes, and he completely lost consciousness. When he returned to his bed, he couldn't seem to wake up properly, feeling only a heavy dizziness and a headache. Before him, a line of small blue characters appeared. Spirit value, 30. What is this? Recalling the words he saw before losing consciousness, it seemed as though he had died. Just at that moment, his phone began to vibrate. It was a message from Zhang Yan. Lin Chun, if you are already awake, do not make a single sound. Sumin is already dead. You are next, which, as far as warnings go, was about as terrifying as it gets. Upon seeing the message, Lin Chun panicked and immediately turned his head towards Sumin's bed. He wondered what he was looking at, as the silhouette leaning over the bed was far too large to be Sumin. Furthermore, that foul, unpleasant odor was still hanging heavily in the air. With every passing second, the scent became more nauseating and pungent, filling the small room. And from the other side of the dormitory, those rhythmic chewing sounds continued without pause. Crunch, crunch. It sounded exactly as if a wild beast were devouring raw flesh. At that moment, a single, chilling question suddenly surfaced in his mind. If the figure on the opposite bed wasn't Sumin, then who, or what, could it possibly be? And what exactly was it eating? An intense sense of dread began to fill his heart. His phone vibrated once more with another message. There is a monster in our dormitory, but it cannot see. As long as you don't make a sound, you will be safe for now. It seemed poor Sumin had been devoured simply because he had been snoring too loudly. As he read those lines, his eyes widened in pure, unadulterated shock. Noise. He realized with a jolt that even the vibration of his phone counted as noise. Thinking quickly, he hurriedly fumbled with the settings to put the phone on silent mode. Finally, the dormitory fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. But then he discovered, with absolute terror, that the monster had suddenly disappeared from the bed. Just as he was about to type a reply to ask Zhang Yan for more information, he suddenly felt a strange, faint glow emanating from directly above his head. Instinctively, he looked up, and in an instant, we see him face to face with a monster that made his skin crawl. An unknown creature was hanging upside down from the ceiling, staring directly at him with a fixed, unsettling gaze. In the very next second, the monster's neck stretched out like a ghost reaching through the shadows. With a single bite, it tore his head off, and his vision was plunged once more into total darkness. When he opened his eyes for the third time, he felt nothing but an unbearable, throbbing headache. The small blue letters floating before him had also changed, reflecting a grim new reality. Spirit value, 0. He felt a sudden, icy chill wash over his entire body. Dying once costs 30 points. He wondered if he would truly vanish if he were to die just one more time. He stared at the massive silhouette on the opposite bed, which seemed to be feeding with terrifying enthusiasm. The constant sounds of chewing and swallowing were enough to make anyone's hair stand on end. He barely managed to suppress the desperate urge to leap from his bed and run for his life. Quickly, he pulled out his phone and set it to silent mode, a wise move, all things considered. Just at that moment, a cold, mechanical voice began to resonate deep within his mind. It announced that he had successfully awakened a talent, which was certainly a turn for the better. The binding process began immediately, and within seconds, the connection was successfully established. As a reward, he received 30 spirit points, restoring what he had so violently lost. He concentrated his will and opened his attribute page to see exactly what he was working with. Name, Lin Chun. Talent, Jade Dream. A poetic name for such a dire situation, wouldn't you say? His spirit value sat at 30, and it appeared these points were exchangeable for something more. He found himself immediately drawn to the talent column, curious about the power he now possessed. Jade Dream. It literally means the dream of the jade, a name that sounds far more peaceful than his current reality. He began to wonder if those times he had died were nothing more than a vivid, terrifying dream. If that were true, he was still dreaming even now, a thought that caused his expression to shift restlessly. After that, he turned his full attention to the words regarding exchangeable points. The system responded immediately, displaying a new window of text for him to review. Option 1, 3 attribute points. A tempting offer, to be sure. These could be used to increase his core attributes, such as strength or spirit. Option 2, 3 skill points, which could be used to improve his more conventional abilities. Looking at his rather pitiful current skills, he decided to exchange his spirit value for attribute points instead. He began to deliberate nervously, but just as he was deciding where to put the points, he noticed a faint flicker above him. We see him look up, only to find that terribly terrifying face staring back at him once again. Even though he was holding his breath, he found himself sinking into a state of unprecedented fear. As that face drew closer and closer, he clung to his last spark of lucidity and screamed desperately within his mind. He poured everything into spirit, successfully using 3 attribute points in a frantic bid for survival. His spirit increased by 3, bringing his current value to 9, just as the system message flashed before him. In that instant, he felt a sudden, cooling wave of freshness wash over his brain. His thoughts became instantly more fluid, as if a fog had been lifted from his mind. A spark of ingenuity crossed his mind. He realized that if sound attracted the monster, he could use that to his advantage. He told himself that if he threw something to make a noise, he might be able to lure the creature away. Not daring to delay for even a second, he grabbed his headphone case from the pillow and threw it. Almost the very instant the case hit the floor, the monster on the ceiling lunged toward it with a sharp snap. He only had enough time to spin around and scramble off the bed. Before he could even steady himself, he heard the headphone case being pulverized by the monster in a single, bone-chilling crunch. A moment later, the dormitory was plunged back into a heavy, suffocating silence. He discovered that while he was still terrified, the fear wasn't quite as overwhelming as it had been before. This realization planted a small, nagging suspicion deep within his mind. He wondered if perhaps the closer one gets to the monster, the faster they lose their sanity. And right at that moment, the monster suddenly turned around. It lunged toward his bed, and seeing it move so fast caused a cold sweat to break out across his skin. Fortunately, he had managed to get up just in time, a very narrow escape, to be honest. Had he hesitated for even a second, the monster would have surely devoured him right then and there. As he felt the creature's presence right beside him, that immense, paralyzing terror began to wrap around him once more. This confirmed his suspicions, but before he could even catch his breath, the monster changed targets and crawled toward the foot of the bed. Watching it move, his heart tightened with a new kind of dread. The bed right next to his belonged to Zhang Yin, his roommate. He panicked, telling himself that Zhang Yin absolutely could not be allowed to die here. He racked his brain desperately until he spotted a glass of water on the table, and suddenly, an idea took shape. Quickly, he sent a frantic message to Zhang Yin to coordinate their next move. He told him he would throw the glass to distract the monster, and that Zhang Yin should use that moment to get out of bed. But just as he was about to act, he received a message from Zhang Yin as well. He told him to find some way to make noise and lure the monster away. Then, he should take the opportunity to turn on the light, claiming it was already daytime. According to the plan, the moment the light flickered on, the monster would simply vanish. As he read the message, something about it struck him as incredibly strange. Daytime, but looking around, it was still very clearly the middle of the night. Despite the growing doubts in his heart, he grabbed the glass of water and hurled it. After that, without even waiting to see the monster's reaction, he bolted straight for the door. He reached out with a trembling hand and pressed the light switch. The instant the room was flooded with light, the monster disappeared, but the sight before him made his blood run cold. We see Su Min's bed, now completely covered in gruesome bloodstains. A mass of blurred, unrecognizable shapes appeared before his eyes, filling him with dread. At that very moment, Zhang Yan's voice rang out, sounding more than a little irritated. He asked what all the racket was about, and if he was ever going to let people sleep. He demanded to know why the light was on, and what that overpowering, foul smell was. However, the second he actually processed the state of the dormitory, he sat bolt upright in bed. He cursed in disbelief, asking if that horrific mess on the bed could possibly be Su Min. He stared at his roommate, his voice trembling as he called out Zhang Yan's name. He asked if he had really been asleep this entire time, which left Zhang Yan looking quite confused. Zhang Yan replied that of course he was sleeping. What else would he be doing at this hour? Hearing those words, he felt as if he had been struck by a bolt of lightning. If Zhang Yan had been asleep this entire time, he wondered, then who on earth was the person who had lulled him to sleep? Who was the person he had just been messaging? With that chilling thought, he quickly swiped through his phone to check his contacts. And there it was, right on the main screen. He found another contact named Zhang Yan. When he opened the chat, the history of their previous conversation was clearly visible for him to see. He understood it instantly. Someone had been pretending to be Zhang Yan just to chat with him. A comforting thought, isn't it? Just then, another message arrived, warning him that when he turned on the light, he had to be careful to hide the phone. The sender insisted that he must not let anyone else know who was actually sending these messages. He swallowed hard and, with a trembling thumb, slowly typed out 3 simple words. Who are you? At that moment, we see Yutong Wan, who had been sleeping in the bed next to Su Min, finally wake up as well. His face was also a mask of pure terror as he called out for Lin Chen. He asked Zhang Yan if they were both already awake, his voice filled with uncertainty. He wanted to know what had happened, but Lin Chen didn't answer. He just stared at the reply on his screen. I am the Zhang Yan from the future. The message continued, acknowledging his confusion and doubt, but pleading with him to trust that no harm was intended. The monster, it claimed, had only disappeared temporarily, which, to be honest, is hardly a relief. He was told not to lower his guard, as in this strange world, day and night swap places every 30 minutes. During the night, the monsters come out to hunt, while during the day, they return to their human forms. However, even in the daytime, if the light is low enough, those monsters will still appear. It was currently 2:35 a.m., and the message warned that when 3 a.m. arrived, the monster would show itself once more. Before that happened, he was told he had to kill Yutongwon, because Yutongwon was the monster. The dormitory was now sealed shut, and until it was decided who would live and who would die, no one could leave. As he read that final sentence, he couldn't help but think to himself that this was simply. He rushed over to the door, desperate to see if there was any way out. But the door didn't budge. It wouldn't move even a single centimeter. Seeing this, Zhang Yan also came over to help, pulling at the handle with all his might. Immediately, his expression shifted into one of pure confusion as he wondered why the door wouldn't open. Next, we see Yutongwon and Zhang Yan both racing toward the window. But no matter how hard they pounded on the glass, there was absolutely no reaction from the outside world. Yutongwon began to panic, suggesting that perhaps they should just call the police first. Zhang Yan's face, however, remained terribly grim and shadowed. He explained that he had already tried. The phone had no signal, no network, and even emergency calls were failing. Lin Shun remained silent, standing to the side and watching the expressions of Zhang Yan and Yutongwon very closely. Both of them seemed to be showing genuine signs of confusion and growing anxiety. These were the normal reactions of any ordinary person, which left his mind filled with conflicting thoughts. Following normal logic, he felt he should trust the Zhang Yan on the phone, since without those warnings, he would likely be dead. And yet, that mysterious person was telling him that he had to kill Yutongwon. Was that person really Zhang Yan? In an instant, 1,000 different possibilities crossed his mind. He pinched his thigh hard, forcing himself to stay calm despite the mounting pressure. To be honest, it didn't matter yet if the words of this future Zhang Yan were truth or lies. He knew he had to find the real monster and, more importantly, force it to reveal a clear weakness. Only then could he get help, as acting too quickly would surely turn the others against him, or worse, make them think he killed Su Min. With those thoughts in mind, he decided the best course of action was to test the waters first. Calm down for a moment, he told them. There is something I need to tell you both first. He explained that there was a monster in their room, and that Su Min had been devoured by it. He told them that the moment he turned on the light, the creature had simply vanished. However, he was certain that it was very likely still hiding somewhere inside the room. Upon hearing this, the two of them stood there for a moment, completely stunned by his words. Yutongwon began to tremble all over, stammering that it was impossible for monsters to exist in this world. He asked Lin Shun if perhaps, after seeing such a bloody scene, his brain's defense mechanism had created hallucinations. Hearing this theory, Zhang Yan nodded in agreement and decided to add his own perspective. Rather than believing in man-eating monsters, he preferred to think this was all some elaborate prank being filmed. He suggested that the doors and windows of their residence must have been secretly tampered with. For all they knew, Su Min was hiding somewhere right now, laughing at their terrified reactions. Growing more confident, Zhang Yan went straight to Su Min's bed to investigate for himself. A short while later, he let out a sharp cry of surprise. This was all very real. Su Min was truly dead, and seeing the two of them spiraling into panic, Lin Shen took control of the conversation again. He told them to stop guessing, insisting that if he saw a monster, it certainly wasn't an hallucination. And whether they believed him or not, the most pressing problem remained. Where was the monster hiding? He suspected the creature was hiding in plain sight, that it had already taken over someone's body. As we can imagine, hearing this caused the other two to look at each other with deep concern. Zhang Yan finally exclaimed in alarm, demanding to know exactly what he meant by that. Could these monsters actually be parasites? Faced with the question, Lin Shen paused for a moment to reflect. He explained it was only a hypothesis, believing that even if a monster occupied a human body, it wouldn't necessarily possess their memories. And so, we see him propose a test. Each of them would share something that only the three of them could possibly know. This way, perhaps the monster would inadvertently reveal its presence by failing to keep up. Lin Shen started, recalling the time he performed a routine involving tearing a book and a basketball dance. After thinking for a second, Zhang Yan added that on that same day, he had performed one-fingered pull-ups for everyone. He also mentioned practicing wrestling with the instructor, while Yutongwon swallowed hard, confessing he had broken up with his girlfriend just 2 days ago. He reminded them that they had both gone out drinking with him afterward. As they spoke, both Yutongwon and Zhang Yan visibly relaxed. But our protagonist was not quite so optimistic, and he decided to put Yutongwon to the test. He asked him directly if he had noticed anything strange or felt any specific sensation just before waking up. Upon hearing the question, Yutongwon simply shook his head, claiming he hadn't felt a thing. Lin Shen frowned and stepped closer, noting that the metallic scent of blood in the room was incredibly overpowering. Su Min had been reduced to nothing more than a pile of torn flesh, and Yutongwon had been in the very next bed. He pressed him, asking how he could truly feel nothing. After all, Zhang Yan only kept his composure because his father was a forensic pathologist. His father often took him to crime scenes, which, to be honest, is a rather intense way to spend father-son time. But for Yu Tongwen, who was usually the most easily frightened of the group, the lack of nausea was suspicious. Cornered, Yu Tongwen backed away until he slumped onto the floor, demanding to know what Lin Shun was implying. He argued that perhaps he had simply been in a deep sleep and that such a detail wasn't enough to brand him a monster. Yu Tongwen's eyes grew red with tears, showing the raw indignation and rage of a man who felt unjustly accused. Watching this display of emotion, Lin Shen's frown only deepened as he considered his next move. That expression didn't seem fake at all, leading Lin Shen to wonder if Yu Tongwen really had been asleep the entire time. Could he truly feel no fear? He questioned if he was mistaken, or if this monster was simply a world-class actor. We see him glance sideways at the light switch right next to the bedroom door, considering his options. He wondered if he would have to resort to that specific method, the one mentioned in the warning from the future Zhang Yan. It seemed these monsters had to follow the rules of day and night in order to claim their victims. When the light had been turned on earlier, the monster had vanished instantly. Therefore, he reasoned that if he flipped the switch and turned the lights off, the creature would likely reappear. And in that darkness, it would finally become clear which of them was the monster. He looked down at his phone once more. It was 2:46 in the morning. There was no time left. Having made his decision, he walked directly toward the light switch. But just as he moved, a figure suddenly stepped in his way, blocking his path. It was Yu Tongwen, who began to speak with a noticeably trembling voice. He turned to the others, asking Zhang Yan if he didn't find Lin Shen's behavior incredibly suspicious. He pointed out that Lin Shen had been staring at his phone for a while, even though none of them had a signal. He openly wondered who Lin Shen was contacting, suggesting that he might be the monster trying to divert attention by accusing others. Hearing this, Lin Shen was taken aback, certain now that Yu Tongwen definitely had something to hide. Given his naturally cowardly character, it was strange that he would suddenly find the courage to confront him, especially in a situation like this, unless, of course, he was the monster trying to stop the lights from going out. Having connected the dots, our protagonist turned to him and delivered a cold, sharp reprimand. He asked Yu Tongwen directly why he was suddenly acting so incredibly nervous. "Are you feeling uneasy?" he asked, now completely certain that the man before him was not what he seemed. He told him flatly that he was sure he was the hidden monster and that he had a way to force him to reveal his true form. Yu Tongwen didn't back down, pointing out that Lin Shen had been the one doing all the talking this entire time. He argued that no one knew if those words were true or false, and that, in his eyes, Lin Shen was the most suspicious one of all. He demanded to see the phone, and under Yu Tongwen's deliberate influence, Zhang Yan's attention finally shifted toward the device. Zhang Yan turned to him and asked, quite reasonably, why he wouldn't just hand over the phone for them to see. Upon hearing this, Lin Shen kept his face completely expressionless, a necessary mask in such a tense moment. He explained that he could show them the phone, but warned that while they checked it, this fake Yu Tongwen would surely find something else to say. His true goal, Lin Shen reasoned, was simply to waste time, but he already knew how to force the creature's hand. He had figured out the trick to making the monster show its true face once and for all. If the monster had vanished when the light was turned on, then it stood to reason that turning it off would make the creature reappear. By flicking the switch off and then immediately back on, they would be able to catch a glimpse of the monster's real form. However, he warned that they mustn't let Yu Tongwen be the one near the switch when the lights went out, because if he transformed, he could easily destroy the switch, leaving them in permanent darkness. And if they couldn't turn the lights back on, well, they would all be as good as dead. Hearing this, a shiver ran down Zhang Yan's spine, and he rushed toward the switch while keeping a wary eye on Yu Tongwen. Just as he was about to flip the switch for the test, Yu Tongwen suddenly screamed for him to stop. He claimed, quite desperately, that he had just awakened the ability to read minds. He insisted that Lin Shen was the real monster, and that the moment the lights went out, they would both be dead. He told Zhang Yan he knew exactly what he was thinking, that if he could really hear thoughts, he should prove it right now. He was right, of course. Seeing Zhang Yan begin to hesitate, Yu Tongwen pressed his advantage and continued. Zhang Yan couldn't believe it. He wondered if Yu Tongwen really did know exactly what he was thinking. He asked himself how such a thing was possible, or if the man had simply made a lucky guess. The more Yu Tongwen spoke, the wider Zhang Yan's eyes became in sheer disbelief. Lin Shen was equally shocked to realize the monster had these kinds of psychological tricks up its sleeve. Seeing Zhang Yan start to waver, Lin Shen rushed forward to stop him from making a mistake. He tried to explain that this was nothing more than a special ability belonging to the monster. He urged him not to be fooled by such a desperate and calculated ruse. They had to kill the creature before 3 in the morning. That was the only way. Otherwise, when the hour finally arrived, they would all surely meet their end. Zhang Yan, caught squarely in the middle of their arguments, found himself trapped in a terrible dilemma. It was at that moment that Yu Tongwen moved toward Zhang Yan's personal space. Claiming he could prove his humanity even in these strange surroundings, he suddenly lunged towards Su Min's desk. He grabbed a kitchen knife and, without a single moment of hesitation, sliced his own wrist. He spoke of how he had been bullied ever since starting university, painting a tragic picture of his past. He claimed they had saved him, but now Su Min was gone and Lin Chun had been possessed by the beast. He insisted he didn't want Zhang Yin to die too, preferring to perish alone rather than have them both die in the dark. He begged Zhang Yin to believe him, and seeing the blood, Zhang Yin stood there completely stunned. His eyes filled with emotional tears, and it seemed he had finally chosen to believe Yu Tongwen's story. Lin Chun watched this unfold, knowing deep down that the situation had spiraled completely out of control. Lin Chun took a deep breath, cursing the situation. This martyr act was a truly devious trick. The creature had struck Zhang Yan's weak point, and now, the young man was beginning to distrust him. He realized that if he kept insisting Yu Tongwen was the monster, Zhang Yan would surely turn against him. Desperate for a solution, he glanced down at his phone to see if anything had changed. It was already 2:56 in the morning. There was practically no time left. And then, at that exact critical moment, the long-awaited message from Zhang Yan finally arrived. It was a message from the future Zhang Yan, asking if Lin Chun had failed to kill Yu Tongwen yet. Time was running out, but the message contained one vital piece of information. We learn here that monsters who have just possessed a human body cannot digest large amounts of memory quickly. They usually merge basic human knowledge selectively, while the rest of the memories require a great effort to recall. Upon reading this, Lin Chun immediately lifted his head, a new plan forming in his mind. He confronted the man, noting that Yu Tongwen claimed to have broken up with his girlfriend just the day before. But he challenged him to remember the exact day they had met for the very first time. Hearing this, Yu Tongwen's face twisted into an expression of intense, calculated pain. The creature tried to deflect, asking what trick Lin Chun was playing now that he had been exposed. Lin Chun interrupted him directly, demanding an answer to his questions right that second. He asked who had paid for the meal when they first met during their freshman year. He pressed him on his English exam score, but this time, Yu Tongwen simply closed his eyes. The man weakly asked him how much a glass of imperial jade wine cost, trying to maintain his facade. Lin Chun continued his interrogation, but Yu Tongwen remained slumped, acting as if he were at death's door. "I'm a little tired. Let me think," the man whispered, trying to buy himself more time. It was at that precise moment that Zhang Yin interrupted their dialogue with a loud shout. Before anyone could react, Zhang Yin had already reached out and flipped the light switch. The instant the lights went out, the monster's neck stretched out in a truly grotesque fashion. And just as the creature was about to bite him, the room was suddenly flooded with light again. The monster reappeared exactly where it had fallen, instantly shifting back into the form of Yu Tongwen. A shiver of cold sweat ran down Lin Chun's spine as he realized how close death had come. It was a stroke of luck, really, that Zhang Yin had been so quick to turn the lights back on. Otherwise, he would have been a dead man. Meanwhile, Zhang Yin cried out in a mix of shock and fury. Realizing he'd been tricked, Zhang Yin kicked the creature down and began beating it mercilessly with an iron lamp. Seeing the attacks weren't hitting a vital spot, Lin Chun grabbed the kitchen knife and plunged it into the creature's throat. He followed up by stabbing it several times in the heart, only stopping once he was sure it was over. Strangely enough, even in death, Yu Tongwen did not revert to his monstrous form. He checked his phone quickly. It was already 2:59, and the chat was flooded with messages from the future Zhang Yin. The messages were frantic, asking if he'd killed Yu Tongwen yet, and stating that time was almost up. The future Zhang Yin told him to listen carefully to his instructions the moment he stepped out the door. He was told to trust no one, head to the building's rooftop as fast as possible, and jump off. According to the message, that was his only real chance of making an escape. Furthermore, we learned there is a girl in the building named Chu Ting who plays a role in this. If he ran into her, he was to tell her that the time point was located in room 1104. From this moment on, he would have to give everything he had just to survive. He took a quick glance at his phone, and though there was no time to read carefully, urgent messages were flooding the screen. He looked at Yu Tongwen, wondering why the man hadn't reverted to his monstrous form yet. And then, another message from the future Zhang Yin flickered into view. The message was a warning. He had failed to send a crucial piece of information earlier. The vitality of these monsters is incredibly tenacious, and only decapitation ensures they are truly dead. It was a curse, really, to have missed such a vital detail in the heat of the moment. Assuming it was some kind of interference from the rules, Lin Chun cursed under his breath and picked up the knife once more. But just then, Yu Tongwen, now barely recognizable, let a sinister smile creep across the corner of his lips. In the very next second, total darkness swallowed the room. Everything in his field of vision vanished, and Zhang Yan's sudden cry of surprise was cut short instantly. Then, a strange, wet chewing sound began to echo through the silence of the room. Driven by pure survival instinct, he lunged for the switch, clicking it desperately over and over, but the light refused to return. In the pitch black, he felt a massive maw begin to devour his chest and abdomen. An overwhelming pain washed over him, and he felt his consciousness slip away into nothingness. Suddenly, back in the bedroom in the middle of the night, he snapped his eyes open and bolted upright in bed. Incredibly, he wasn't dead, though in the dark he couldn't even see his own hands, only that rhythmic chewing sound remained. His skin crawled instantly, and holding his heavy breath, he fumbled for the phone hidden under his pillow. It was only 2:30 a.m., and his pupils contracted in sheer disbelief. He had to wonder, was everything he had just endured nothing more than a nightmare? He moved quickly, putting his phone on silent mode to avoid making a sound. Just at that moment, a familiar mechanical voice echoed clearly inside his mind. Detection complete. You have awakened your gift. Initiating the binding process now. The binding was finished in less than a second, exactly as it had happened before. With practiced skill, he summoned the system panel to appear before him. It was identical to the previous one, so that was the secret then. He wondered if those were prophetic dreams, and if this, finally, was reality. The 3 previous times he had been killed by those monsters had all occurred within the dream, where his spiritual value dropped to 0 upon his 3rd death, and then the dream ended, and he suddenly discovered his spirit attribute was now at 9. It turned out that the attribute improvements he gained while dreaming were actually retained upon waking up. He checked his phone once more. The message from Zhang Yin still hadn't arrived yet. He had to consider, was communication only possible while he was inside the dream? He took a deep breath, knowing this was no time for idle speculation. The priority was to kill the monster, as he couldn't afford to die again. He fumbled in the dark for the Bluetooth earpiece sitting next to his pillow. He tossed it away, and at the sharp sound of the impact, the massive creature lunged toward it. Seizing the chance, he stood up, grabbed the water glass from the table, and threw it hard. The moment it shattered, he ran to the switch by the door and flipped on the light. The irritated voice of Zanjan rang out immediately. Why are you turning on the light? And what is that incredibly strong smell? A moment later, Yutong Bin also got out of his bed. He asked if Lin Shun and Zanjan were already awake. When asked what had happened, Lin Shun didn't offer much of an explanation. He simply ran toward the door, pretending he was trying to force it open. The result was obvious. Due to the restrictions of the rules, the door couldn't be opened yet. Seeing this, both Zanjan and Yutong Bin climbed down and came running toward him. Deep down, of course, he knew perfectly well the door wouldn't budge. He only did it to lure Yutong Bin over to his side. We see him open the personal panel once more, calling out to the system. He commanded it to increase his points, all in his strength, using 3 attribute points. His strength increased by 3, bringing his current total to 8. A sharp, indescribable pain suddenly surged through his entire body. He felt every one of his muscles swell up in an instant. In that moment, he felt confident enough to kill a stone ox with a single punch. Yutong Bin, noticing something was wrong, quickly approached to ask what was happening. But before he could finish his sentence, Lin Shin hit him with a violent kick. Yutong Bin slammed hard against the wall, leaving Zanjan startled as he grabbed Lin Shin's arm. Demanding to know what he was doing, Lin Shin seized Zanjan's wrist and dragged him back to the switch. Yutong Bin is a monster, Lin Shin warned him, explaining that Su Min had been devoured by him. The sheer strength he displayed left Zanjan completely stunned. In his usual estimation, Lin Shun was a weakling, but the power he was showing now was even greater than his own. He held the phone with one hand, shining the flashlight directly at Yutong Bin, while his other hand remained on the light switch. As Zanjan watched closely, there was a sudden click, and the dormitory was plunged into darkness. Yutong Bin's thin body instantly twisted and swelled, transforming into a monster nearly 2 meters tall. Zanjan hadn't even reacted before the creature was already lunging toward them at high speed. Immediately after, another click followed, and the dormitory light was restored. Yutong Bin returned to his original form and collapsed to the floor, as if everything that had happened was a mere hallucination. Zanjan's eyes went wide, utterly unable to believe what he had just witnessed. In that moment, Lin Shun had already launched himself forward. He grabbed a fruit knife from Su Min's table, giving Yutong Bin no chance to speak or defend himself. Driven by his 8 points of strength, he met no resistance as he gripped the head and severed it from the body with a single stroke. Looking down at the decapitated corpse of the monster on the floor, he felt a bit dazed. It had been so simple this time. Meanwhile, the metallic voice of the system echoed in his mind. He was informed that he had eliminated an avatar of the anxiety demon. Hearing this, he snapped out of his daze, wondering what exactly an anxiety demon could be. It seemed to be a creature defined by its insidious and treacherous nature. If that was only an avatar, he wondered how terrifying its true body must be. He recalled Zanjan's warning from the dream. From the moment he left the dormitory, no one could be trusted. Evidently, an immense danger lurks throughout this entire dormitory building. He regained his composure and continued reviewing the system notifications. His spiritual value had increased by 10 points. The system detected that this was his first time eliminating an anomalous creature. As a reward, he earned the right to use a supernatural ability. The options appeared before him. Supernatural Ability 1, Astral Poison. This would allow him to touch a target's body with the palm of his hand and read their thoughts. Extraordinary Ability 2, Frenzy. By activating this state, his strength and agility would increase by 50%, while his perception of pain would be halved. Extraordinary Ability 3, Clone. He could separate any tissue from his own body to create a duplicate. The clone's attributes would be exactly 50% of those of his original body. He had to choose within 10 seconds, otherwise, it would be considered a forfeiture, a bit harsh, perhaps. Seeing this, he was initially overjoyed that killing these anomalies yielded such rewards. He could increase his essence points, which served as the very foundation for strengthening his power. Then, he considered the choices seriously, as all these skills were quite practical. However, while Frenzy could boost his strength compared to the monsters from his dreams, it still felt insufficient. The clone might be useful in a crisis, but with only half his attributes, it would likely be annihilated instantly by current monsters. In contrast, Astral Poison offered a much greater margin for error. If he found himself in a dilemma in the future, at least he could make a precise, informed decision. With those thoughts in mind, he finally reached a firm determination. He chose Astral Poison, and a second later, the system's mechanical voice echoed in his mind. The notification confirmed that he had successfully obtained the extraordinary ability. Having secured Astral Poison, he finally exhaled a long, heavy sigh of relief. Only 3 minutes had passed since he first climbed out of bed, and yet, to him, it felt as though an entire lifetime had already slipped by. Beside him, Zhang Yan's frantic shouting still hadn't ceased, which was understandable, given the circumstances. He stepped closer and placed a steadying hand on his friend's shoulder. He told Zhang Yan that while he surely had questions, the situation had become incredibly urgent. He asked him just once if he could offer his unconditional trust. He needed to know if Zhang Yan would stay by his side, and hearing this, Zhang Yan nodded without a moment's hesitation. He insisted he had to trust him, as they were brothers by blood. He even joked that he'd given the shirt off his back, or more, if it were truly necessary. Ignoring the nonsense, he simply grabbed the fruit knife and pulled open the bedroom door. As he crossed the threshold, an incredibly thick and indescribable scent of blood hit him. It flooded his senses as a truly hellish scene began to unfold before our eyes. The entire hallway had been stained a deep, dark shade of crimson. Not far away, a dozen people were huddled together amidst a mechanical, grinding noise. Their voices mixed into a chaotic chorus of screams, pleading for someone to kill it quickly. Instinctively, he wanted to retreat back into the room, but the sole of his shoe made a sticky, crunching sound. That sound, though not particularly loud, immediately drew everyone's attention toward them. Someone shouted that the door to room 4012 had finally opened. In an instant, dozens of eyes turned to stare directly at our protagonists. People wondered aloud how it was possible for 2 people to emerge this time. They questioned if they were monsters, deciding that regardless of what they were, they had to be controlled first. Everyone was speaking at once, closing in on them with a sense of desperation. Seeing this, his heart sank. He had originally planned to head for the roof as quickly as possible. However, the terrifying and bloody scene in the hallway forced him to take the situation much more seriously. The people around him were clearly panicked, and yet, strangely enough, none of them were running away. To him, that could only mean one thing. They were all trapped, without a shadow of a doubt. He immediately converted his only 10 essence points into an attribute point and added it directly to his strength. Then, he gripped the fruit knife, preparing to strike first, but right at that moment, everything changed. A system notification appeared before him that made the hair on his neck stand on end. It detected that he was currently at the convergence point within the gloom. A forced mission was activated. The night demon hidden in the darkness already had him in its sights. Every decision he made from now on would be a literal test between life and death. The mission objective was clear. He had to prevent the ascension of the night demon. The reward for succeeding would be the chance to choose one of 3 random divine connection sequences. The penalty for failure, however, was forced annihilation, the ultimate mission limit. 4 o'clock in the morning, the mission begins. Just as he was reflecting on the mission's details, a somber voice suddenly rang out from behind the group. Everyone fell silent as a student holding a baseball bat emerged from the crowd. He recognized him instantly as the student council president. His name was Su Pinhu, a man who usually surrounded himself with followers and looked down on ordinary students like us. Su Pinhu came to a halt just half a step away from him. How did you kill the monster, and how did you get out? You'd better tell me everything that happened in your room. He simply raised an eyebrow and, instead of answering, asked what had happened there in the hallway. Why are there so many dead? Tell me what occurred here. Hearing this, Su Pinhu's expression darkened, but he glanced at Zhan Jan standing nearby and, suppressing his fury, began to explain. It turned out that last night, someone who couldn't sleep visited other rooms only to discover the tenants were all dead. After that, everyone was alarmed, but they found there were still 3 rooms that simply could not be opened. There was no internet or phone signal, and it was impossible to even call for emergency services. They were all trapped, and then, around 2 in the morning, the lights suddenly went out completely. No one could see a thing, and the entire hallway was filled with screams of pure agony. Room 03 suddenly swung open, and only a man named Matau managed to come out alive. They wanted to ask what happened, and he claimed there was a circuit problem and that the monster traveled through the fluorescent tubes. He explained that once it gathers enough energy, the monster enters the real world, and the lights going out is the signal of its arrival. If they wanted to survive, they were told they had to destroy the power source or the fluorescent tubes themselves. Su Pinhu believed those lies, but when he flipped the switch, the air was immediately filled with terrified screams. Although he flipped the switch back as fast as possible, by the time the light returned, 3 more companions had died tragically. After listening to the explanation, it was as if the fog in his mind finally began to clear. Many things that had seemed incomprehensible before were suddenly becoming quite clear. He had often wondered why the monster didn't simply go to the main electrical room to destroy the power source first. Even Newton, in that strange dream, clearly had the opportunity to turn off the lights in secret. Why hadn't he? It seemed that due to certain rules, the monster simply cannot interfere with lights or electricity directly. It can only deceive and manipulate humans into doing those things for it. A clever trick, to be sure. At that moment, Su Pinhu turned his gaze toward our protagonists quite suddenly. Now that you two have made it out, tell me exactly what happened in your room. How did you kill it? If you don't cooperate, we'll just have to assume that you are the monsters. Su Pinhu's words struck a chord, fueling the raw emotions of everyone standing there. Originally, some had backed away, intimidated by Zhang Yan's presence. But in an instant, the crowd's fear turned into a collective, simmering rage. Feeling those sharp, knife-like glares all around him, he decided to take a step forward. He told them all to calm down, reminding them that they shared the same goal, getting out of there as soon as possible. He explained that he already had a plan, but to make it work, he first needed to confirm two things. The first thing he needed to know was the current location of Mateo. Su Pinhu didn't say a word. He simply gestured with his chin toward a spot not far away. Over there, the crowd that had been blocking the view began to shift. They dispersed naturally to either side, following Su Pinhu's gaze, but a second later, everyone froze in total shock. There, aside from a dark pool of blood on the floor, there was absolutely no one to be seen. Upon seeing this, Su Pinhu turned pale. He rushed forward, frantically asking the people around him for answers. "Where is Mateo?" he demanded, as the crowd began to stir in a sudden, nervous commotion. "We don't know," they stammered. "He was right here just a moment ago. Wasn't he beaten to death? How could he have simply vanished into thin air?" It was a chilling scene, the kind that makes the blood run cold, and for good reason. Looking out at the confused crowd, Zhang Yin posed a single, unsettling question. Is it possible, he wondered aloud, that Mateo never actually died at all? He asked them directly, had any of them actually seen Mateo transform into a monster? Hearing this, Su Pinhu was visibly taken aback, his confusion growing by the second. What are you trying to say? There was a decapitated monster's corpse in his room, just now. He wondered if the only way for these creatures to truly die was by taking their heads. Zhang Yin didn't answer. He simply stared at Su Pinhu and his henchman, Li Chuan, who stood nearby. "Imperial jade leaf wine," he said suddenly. "How much does a single glass cost?" Li Chuan stood there, utterly stunned. "What on earth are you talking about?" It seemed like nonsense, of course, but Zhang Yan's expression remained perfectly calm and unreadable. "I'm giving you one chance," he warned. "Answer me right now." Li Chuan frowned deeply, turning to his boss. "Brother Pen, these two bastards are doing this on purpose. They have no intention of cooperating. We shouldn't waste any more of our time with them. I bet they're just like Mateo," he shouted. "All of them turned into monsters." He urged the crowd to attack together, but before he could finish, Zhang Yin suddenly lunged forward. He grabbed Li Chuan's head and twisted it violently, fueled by the raw power of his 9 strength attribute points. Li Chuan's cervical spine snapped instantly with a sickening crack. It was a scene so terrifying that the entire crowd recoiled in pure, instinctive fear. A moment later, they raised their weapons, desperately trying to bring him under control. Seeing this, Zhang Yin simply pointed to Li Chuan lying on the ground. He asked if they were truly sure they wanted to attack, urging them to open their eyes and see the real monster. Everyone looked where he pointed, only to see Li Chuan's corpse twisting and swelling into a hideous, unrecognizable creature. At the sight of this, Su Pinhu began to tremble uncontrollably. Was Li Chuan really a monster? To him, it seemed utterly impossible. After all, he had been standing right there with them the entire time. He wondered how he could be a monster and if all these creatures were actually transformed humans. The crowd began to argue immediately, but Zhang Yan's voice soon pulled their thoughts back to reality. He explained that monsters hide among the crowd, following the brutal rules of the slaughter between day and night. When night falls, the monsters emerge to hunt and kill. But when day arrives, the humans finally have their chance to find and kill the monsters. Hearing this, the tightly packed crowd scattered, and every glance they exchanged was now laced with deep suspicion. Watching the chaos unfold, he let out a cold, quiet laugh. Having already killed 2 monsters, his standing as a human was currently the strongest among them. He declared that anyone who attacked him was, in all likelihood, a monster themselves. And there was one more thing. He warned them to watch anyone who dared to incite the crowd's emotions. He declared that the monster deserved to die, and then his gaze slowly swept across everyone in the room. One by one, everyone who met his eyes quickly looked away, unable to maintain the contact. Finally, we see his gaze settle on a heavy-set man standing in the corner of the room. He noted that he remembered his name was Wanzan, wasn't it? Even though he shared a dormitory with Li Chuan, the truth was that Li Chuan used to bully and intimidate him constantly. Logically, he should have hated him, so why had he been defending him so actively just a moment ago? He then asked him a specific question: how much does a glass of Imperial Jade leaf wine cost? Upon hearing this, everyone immediately remembered the strange questions he had asked before killing Li Chuan. The crowd sensed something was wrong and quickly backed away from Wanzan, whose face turned deathly pale. Wanzan stammered, asking if he really thought that he was a monster as well. Zhang Yin simply replied that it was 180 for a glass, Wanzan. He asked again if he intended to answer, then followed up by asking where the best excavation technology in Shandong was located. Wanzan answered everything quickly and correctly, but after a 2-second stare, Zhang Yin suddenly smiled and told him to follow. He walked decisively toward the side of the hallway, and though Wanzan hesitated, he eventually followed obediently for about 10 meters. Stopping suddenly, he pointed to the recessed light switch on the wall and ordered Wanzan to flip it down. The others began to object in alarm, but Zhang Yin simply lifted his chin and repeated the order to flip the switch. Cold sweat poured down Wanzan's face as he argued that turning off the lights would let the monsters kill everyone. Zhang Yin leaned against the wall and suggested he flip it and then turn it back on as fast as possible. With reddened eyes, Wanzan snapped that these were just guesses and that Zhang Yin only wanted to kill to vent his anger. He told Zhang Yin to kill him if he truly believed he was a monster, but he refused to touch that switch. Wanzan showed an expression of pure determination as he grabbed Zhang Yan's wrist with the knife, begging him to end it if he must, provided he didn't vent his anger on the others. However, before Wanzan could even touch him, Zhang Yin had already delivered a powerful kick, sending him flying like a projectile against the back wall as his smile turned cold. He noted that Wanzan would rather risk his life than flip the switch, not because he didn't want to, but because he simply couldn't, a realization that made Wanzan begin to plead. Distraught, he knelt and crawled toward Zhang Yan's feet, claiming he had no idea what was happening, but Zhang Yan ignored the excuses and drove the knife home. Wanzan was killed instantly, and as his body transformed into a monstrous shape, the onlookers stood frozen in shock. The first time might have been a coincidence, but this was different. He had identified the monster with the same surgical precision, and suddenly, a spark of hope appeared in the crowd. Perhaps this man really could lead them out of this nightmare. Zhang Yin, indifferent to their thoughts, had the other Zhang Yin stand beside him as he issued 2 requirements. First, everyone had to back away at least 5 meters while staying in sight. Second, they were to turn on their phone flashlights and find the person closest to them immediately, and they only had 10 seconds to comply. Though they were bewildered, they obeyed as if they had found a true leader, and with a sharp click, he flipped the switch, plunging the hallway into total darkness. We see him take a quick look to confirm everyone still looked human before immediately flipping the switch back up. The entire process took barely a second. When the dim light returned to the hallway, a collective sigh of relief filled the air, and the thick cloud of suspicion between them finally began to dissipate. At that moment, the faint sound of a door opening drew their attention to room 418, where a man in pajamas was stepping out into the corridor. The man looked around strangely before suddenly bolting in the opposite direction, prompting someone to shout that he must be a monster in disguise. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed with a cold light as he remembered the system's warning. The night demon had already set its sights on him. Just as the man in pajamas reached the fire door to escape into the stairwell, a whistling sound cut through the air and a fruit knife buried itself in his back. The impact sent him crashing to the floor, yet he continued to crawl away with difficulty, prompting Zhang Yin to shout a command to his companion. Almost instantly, the other Zhang Yin shot past like an arrow, reaching the fire door just as the man tried to slip through and dragging him back into the hall. Only half an arm remained visible clutching the edge of the door, and as Zhang Yin watched, a large, thick hand emerged from the darkness of the stairwell. The hand, covered in a layer of blackish rot, reached out to grab the companion's head, causing Zhang Yan's pupils to dilate as he screamed a warning to be careful. Fortunately, thanks to that warning, he leaned back instinctively and dodged the grasp as Zhang Yin pulled him away from the cracked fire door, where 2 enormous eyes watched. We see monsters standing tall in the darkness of the hallway where the light cannot reach. One of them has rotting, greenish-black flesh and bloodshot eyes that look as if they might drip. The other monster wears a thin, stretched nightgown, and heavy gasps escape its mouth. There is a clear difference between the two. The one in the nightgown seems to be just like the one that occupied Tun Ben's body, unable to feed itself, while the greenish-black monster appears relatively more complete. Its eyes, in particular, make it evident that it can see us. Deep down, Zhang Yin felt a secret alarm. Does the monster grow stronger the more people it devours? At that moment, the others who had run over were terrified to see the 2 creatures in the hall. Everyone retreated in a hurry. He gave a low-voiced command for flashlights, and then, alongside his companion, he switched on the lights and aimed them deep into the corridor. However, the 2 monsters remained indifferent, staring coldly at the group until several people finally worked up the courage to turn on their own flashlights and join in. Only then did the 2 monsters retreat down the stairs. Seeing this, Su Penju showed a flash of joy on his face, suggesting that if they all went down together with lights on, the monsters wouldn't dare come near. At these words, everyone took heart, looking at Zhang Yin with eyes full of hope, waiting for him to take that first dangerous step. Faced with such a blatant display of cowardice, he let out a short laugh and asked why they didn't go down first. Su Penju's voice sounded perfectly natural as he argued that the strongest should lead. He claimed that normal people couldn't go first because, if danger appeared, they wouldn't have the slightest capacity to defend themselves. Zhang Yin observed their expressions and laughed sarcastically. He realized that these people hadn't changed at all. Just a short while ago, they were suspicious and ready to turn on him, and now they expected him to be their shield. It was an absurd situation, really, being asked to protect the very people who would have abandoned him. He looked at the group and decided he wasn't going to play the hero for their convenience. He told them flatly that he wasn't going. This sudden refusal caused a wave of panic to wash over the crowd, and they began to plead with him, begging him not to leave them behind. They promised to obey his every word. He looked at them coldly and stated that if they wanted to leave with him, they had to follow his orders. They had 2 minutes to find as many mobile phones as possible and gather in room 412. Of course, he added that if they weren't afraid of death, they were free to go down now with Su Pinju. After leaving them with those words, he took his flashlight and returned to room 412. As soon as he entered, he grabbed several bottles of mineral water and a carton of milk from Su Min's desk. He then opened the water bottles and poured a bit of milk into each one, shaking them gently to mix the liquids. While he was busy with this, some of his companions came running in with the phones. Su Pinju, growing impatient, asked why he was wasting everyone's time with water bottles. Without even looking up, Zhang Yin replied that they needed a much brighter light. He began fixing the collected phones to a mop handle and then tied the bottle of milky water to the flashlight, using the principle of light reflection to create a glow far more intense than a standard beam. Everyone watched, wide-eyed and speechless, as he created the brightest light they had ever seen. It was certainly much better than a simple flashlight. Upon seeing it, Su Pinju was both surprised and immensely relieved, suggesting that if they made more of these long-handled lamps, they could all carry one and descend the stairs safely. He was about to call for more phones when Zhang Yin stood up and interrupted him, noting there simply wasn't enough time. Night and day were alternating every half hour, and in less than 5 minutes, it would be 3 in the morning, the darkness would return. At these words, everyone crowded together, rushing toward the nearest fire escape, terrified that a single slow step might cost them their lives. However, upon reaching the fire door, they all stopped abruptly, looking back at him with expectation. It was then that we see Su Pinju's eyes darting around, clearly calculating his next move. He seemed to be waiting for Zhang Yin to take the lead, hoping the stronger man would face whatever was lurking behind that door first. At this moment, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut, as the group stood frozen at the threshold of the stairwell. Zhang Yin stood firm, his own light shining brightly, showing no intention of being their sacrificial lamb. His next words made Su Pinju's eyelids twitch violently. Since he now held the weapon to save himself, he should be the one to go down and scout the path. He added that if Su Pinju refused to go, he would have to knock him out and leave him behind to avoid any further obstacles. Naturally, Su Pinju turned pale instantly. He stammered that he was willing to explore and quickly raised the long-handled lamp, stepping through the fire door. On the landing between the 4th and 3rd floors, those two horrific, werewolf-like monsters were still standing tall. Su Pinju grit his teeth and took a step down. The two creatures didn't move. He reached the 2nd step, then the 4th, and finally, the monsters reacted, retreating step by step. Seeing this, Su Pinju let out a heavy sigh of relief, feeling as though he were on the verge of a total collapse. But Zhang Yin noticed something. The black-skinned monster retreated first, followed by the one in pajamas. There was a slight delay between their movements, yet there had been no verbal communication. It made one wonder, can these monsters share information telepathically? There was also a suspicious point to confirm. Were they truly repelled by the light, or were they deliberately luring the group further in? To be honest, it was a chilling thought. Thinking this, he turned to the 4 people behind him and ordered them to go down as well. They looked at each other, dejected, but followed Su Pinju down the stairs. From his current angle, Zhang Yin could no longer see the monsters. If they were faking their retreat, they could leap back in a single bound and start a massacre. At this point, he was about 70% certain the light was working. He led his companion toward the stairwell and, leaning in close, whispered something into her ear. He then ordered the other 5 to stand up and provide the maximum amount of illumination possible, and they quickly nodded in agreement. The others were suddenly left without light, and under the astonished gaze of Su Pinju and the rest, Zhang Yin, holding the long fluorescent tube, suddenly adopted a perfect throwing stance. Aiming directly at the 2 monsters below, he threw it with great force. Almost instantly, the monster with the blackish, rotting skin jumped downward, but the other one, the monster in pajamas, reacted half a second too late. When the bright beam of light hit it, something strange happened. The creature turned into a fleeting blur. Climbing the stairs, it lunged toward him. In the hallway outside the fire door, a young man in pajamas appeared out of nowhere, looking for a head to strike. Startled by the sight, Zhang Yin lunged toward him, drawing his fruit knife in one quick motion and plunging it into the back of the creature's neck. After killing it, he wasted no time. He shouted to the other 5 to get down immediately and dashed down the stairs. Seeing Su Pinju and the others, he reached out his hand and, snatching the long fluorescent tube they were holding, he told them to follow and not fall behind. Thus, they reached the 1st floor lobby, where more than a dozen corpses appeared before them. He only gave them a passing glance, heading straight for the caretaker's room. Unlike the common student dorms, this room had a wooden door and an outer wrought iron gate, which was precisely his ultimate goal in coming here. He stepped firmly into the caretaker's quarters. Reaching the two-story iron bunk bed in the corner, he began to drag it, calling everyone over to help him move the bed to the door. They all obeyed. Suddenly, someone shouted in anger and surprise, asking Su Pinju what he was doing. Everyone looked toward the voice and saw that Su Pinju had, at some point, secretly taken the caretaker's key and locked the iron gate, trapping everyone inside. He called them idiots and told them to stay there and die as they began to scream insults. But Su Pinju didn't stay to talk. He had already vanished with the key in hand. Zhang Yin told the group not to worry about him and to focus on blocking the door as time was running out. Meanwhile, Su Pinju was already at the main entrance, but he discovered that no matter how much he turned the key, he couldn't open the door. Just as he began to sweat in desperation, a loud crack was heard, and the key snapped inside the lock. A second later, without any warning, all light vanished instantly. Night had fallen. Then, Su Pinju could be heard running back to the caretaker's door, screaming like a madman and pounding on the gate with all his might, begging those inside to open up. He admitted his mistake and pleaded for Lin Shun to save him once more. Hearing those harrowing cries for help, someone inside the room spoke up tentatively. It was Su Zichen, the boy with glasses who had knelt before Zhang Yin earlier. He noted that it was now night outside and far too dangerous, as they were all in total darkness with nowhere to run. Someone immediately agreed, pointing out that Su Pinju had intended to leave them all there to die. Why should they worry about someone so wicked, just as they were? About to continue arguing, Zhang Yin interrupted them coldly, telling them to be quiet. He pointed out that Su Pinju was no longer making noise. The monster had already arrived. He warned them that the creature was likely waiting for the door to open. He had barely finished speaking when harrowing screams erupted from outside. "It hurts. I think my leg is broken. Help!" As those sharp cries mingled with the sickening sounds of chewing and swallowing, everyone trembled. Zhang Yan's heart sank. He realized this monster was truly cunning, having deliberately waited. It had kept Su Pinju alive, hoping the others would open up to let him in. Only when it realized they wouldn't budge did it decide to kill him. As the sounds of feeding finally stopped, Zhang Yan immediately warned the group to prepare themselves. Almost the moment the words left his lips, an enormous force slammed into them, and he felt his hands go numb from the vibration. While everyone pushed against the iron bunk bed, he leaned his full weight against the iron door, listening to the pained groans of those beside him. Quickly, he tried to boost their morale. He told them to hold firm, explaining that the monsters only wanted to feed. If they held out, the creatures wouldn't waste time there and would surely move on to find easier prey elsewhere. They only had to resist until dawn, and then he could lead them out. Perhaps his words provided the necessary spark, as everyone gave their absolute best. To their relief, the door wasn't struck again. He watched the status of the iron door on his system interface, where every passing second felt like unbearable torture. Suddenly, the banging stopped, and the night plunged back into a deathly silence. It seemed the monster had finally left. Seeing the others begin to relax, he warned them not to let their guard down yet. There were still 15 minutes left before the night would end. The atmosphere in the room lightened noticeably, and some began to whisper. Zhang Yin, however, frowned. He felt that something wasn't quite right as the clock ticked toward the end of the cycle. As the transition to daylight approached, a horrifying thought crossed his mind. His voice rose suddenly, commanding everyone to start a head count beginning with him. 10 numbers followed in quick succession. A brief silence filled the room before someone spoke up, sounding confused. "How is it that there are only 10 people here? Weren't there 11 of us?" At this, a sense of dread washed over the group. The atmosphere became oppressive once more. Then, Su Zichen's nervous voice rang out, asking why he couldn't hear Xiao Hao. "Xiao Hao, where are you? Why aren't you counting?" He repeated the question over and over into the darkness, his voice trembling as he searched for his friend. "Xiao Hao, where are you? Why aren't you counting?" Then, a strange, raspy voice finally answered. "I'm here. I'm just so tired." As the words were spoken, sounds similar to a beast growl began to emanate from his throat. In that total darkness, where one couldn't even see their own hand, an indescribable feeling of wrongness settled over their hearts. Until now, he had wondered how the others were being parasitized. There was no longer any need for curiosity, as Xiao Hao was undergoing that very process. He hissed at everyone to be silent, informing them that Xiao Hao was currently being taken over. Without a moment's delay, he unfastened the fruit knife he carried at his waist, preparing for the inevitable. He lunged toward the spot where the heaviest breathing was coming from, striking out into the pitch-black void. But he didn't feel the blade sink into soft flesh. Instead, it felt as though he had struck the hard, rough bark of an ancient tree. The tip of the knife, which had already been damaged earlier, could now barely penetrate the surface. He didn't want to give up and tried to press on, but suddenly, an overwhelming wave of fear washed over him. His mind began to race as he realized that Xiao Hao had likely already been replaced by the monster. With that terrifying thought in mind, he quickly retreated until he had put some distance between them. Only then did he feel that paralyzing dread begin to dissipate, if only just a little. In the dark, someone asked in a panicked whisper what on earth had just happened. They wondered how Xiao Hao could have been parasitized when they were still blocking the door so firmly. But before the question could be finished, a low, beastly growl erupted, followed by a person's agonizing scream. Immediately, the heavy, metallic scent of fresh blood began to spread throughout the entire room. Chaos broke out as objects were knocked over, and in the panic, someone even tried to open the door to flee. Zhang Yin quickly lowered his voice and moved to stop them, commanding everyone to stay absolutely silent. He warned them not to make a sound, as the newly transformed monster was blind and could only hunt by noise. Just then, a massive crash echoed nearby. Startled, he instinctively shifted his position in the darkness. A moment later, he heard a sound coming from the exact spot where he had been standing just seconds before. It was an enormous thud that made his hair stand on end. He had only moved as a simple precaution. He never imagined that such a small, cautious choice would be the only thing saving him from a certain death. It seemed the demon had marked him, singling him out as its primary and most lethal target. By now, the others were losing their minds, convinced that the monster from outside had somehow gotten in. Desperate voices began to cry out, asking what they should do and if they should all try to run together. One even shouted in a frenzy, questioning why they were listening to Zhang Yan, claiming he only wanted them to die. Then, we hear the metal beds being dragged across the floor, their sharp screeches filling the air. He chose to ignore it. He had warned them in good faith, yet some were still determined to rush toward their deaths. One after another, agonizing screams began to echo throughout the small room. The sickening sounds of chewing and swallowing followed, alternating in a gruesome rhythm. As the final second of 3:29 in the morning passed, a blinding light suddenly exploded, banishing the darkness. While he was still adjusting to the intense glare, the sudden sound of glass shattering rang out. At that very moment, we see Zhou clutching a broken beer bottle, lunging toward him with massive strides. Previously, Zhou had been as thin as a rail, hardly a physical threat to anyone. But now, his muscles were tense and engorged with blood, and his speed had increased significantly. In an instant, he was at his side. Seeing the bottle aimed at his head, Zhang Yin quickly dodged. At the same time, he gripped his fruit knife tightly in his right hand. He thrust it forward with all his might, aiming directly for Zhou's abdomen. However, the man not only dodged the attack with ease, but also managed to slash Zhang Yin across the face. Suddenly, his mind flashed back to the first time he had ever killed a monster. He remembered when the system offered the extraordinary skill of frenzy and what happened when that state was activated. It increases both strength and agility by 50%, a terrifying advantage in a fight. It was clear now, this man had undoubtedly activated a frenzy of his own. Knowing his own agility was inferior, Zhang Yin raised his left hand to grab him, sacrificing safety for a chance. Instantly, the sharp shards of glass tore right through the palm of his hand. But in that same heartbeat, he extended his right hand and delivered a direct, brutal stab to the belly. Zhang Yin moved behind Zhou, reaching out to grab him firmly by the hair. He pulled back with his left hand, forcing the man's head up and leaving his throat completely exposed. Seizing the opportunity, he slashed through the neck in one motion, decapitating him instantly. At that very moment, the familiar chime of the system notification rang out. You have eliminated a shadow ghost avatar. Current spirituality value, 14. After confirming the kill, he scanned the room and realized that after that half hour of darkness, only 6 people remained alive. He gave them a quick hand gesture, signaling for everyone to stay alert. It wasn't time to rest yet, and he told them to gather their things as quickly as possible. By the light of their homemade lamps, we see the group preparing to make their retreat. Then, enduring the sharp sting, he pulled the largest glass shards from his palm and tied a scrap of cloth around it. The others watched him with tense expressions, and Suzio looked at him with clear concern. She suggested that perhaps they should look for a first aid kit before doing anything else. It needed to be disinfected and bandaged properly, she warned, or an infection would surely follow. He simply shook his head. To be honest, there was simply no time for such luxuries. Perhaps it was due to the massive increase in his physical strength attribute, but even though it hurt, the pain wasn't nearly as unbearable as he had imagined it would be. Once everyone was ready, Zhang Yin stood holding 2 long, homemade fluorescent lamps in his hands. The phone serving as the light source inside the wrapping still had plenty of battery life remaining. Suddenly, an idea struck him. He remembered giving the janitor a powerful, multifunctional flashlight to stay on his good side. It was a common enough object, so he reasoned it should be kept in a relatively accessible place. With that thought in mind, he began to search the immediate surroundings. It didn't take long before he spotted the flashlight resting on a corner windowsill. He gave it a quick inspection and found that all its functions were in perfect working order. The battery still showed 2 bars, and he couldn't help but feel a wave of relief. With this in hand, their level of safety would increase considerably, or so he hoped. Suzio, however, was still filled with doubt and asked what they were supposed to do now. The exit door remained sealed shut by some unknown, invisible force. When she asked how they would escape, he simply turned his head toward the window. There was only one way out of there. They had to go to the roof and jump. The moment he said those words, the expressions on everyone's faces shifted instantly. Suzio could hardly believe her ears, considering the building stood 11 stories high. To her, jumping seemed like a death sentence, and she desperately asked if he was truly certain. She pressed him, asking if he was sure they could leave that way, but he merely waved his hand. He felt he had already fulfilled his promise by telling them how to get out. He had even shown them in person exactly how to construct the makeshift lamps. It was up to them to decide whether to trust him, as he now had other matters to attend to. They would part ways here. Zhang Yin stood paralyzed for just a brief moment. He quickly regained his composure, while the others, predictably, began to grow quite nervous. He paid no further attention to the group's reactions, focused only on the path ahead. Even as he spoke, he had already moved to redeem another attribute point. In this moment, he knew that the most important thing was to grow stronger. This, we realize, was the absolute capital required for survival. Recalling his reaction to the crazed longevity monkey, he decided to assign this single attribute point to agility. The system confirmed the use of the point, and his agility increased by 1. His agility was now at 6, and with the system's notification, a sharp sensation coursed through his body as his muscles grew leaner. Although the change was subtle, the others, with their nerves on edge, immediately noticed something was different. We see Su Zio's eyes flicker as she watched him closely. She told herself she had to trust Lin Chun, because the crisis they faced was one of the most difficult imaginable. It couldn't be judged by common logic. One false step, and they could all be dead. With that in mind, Su Zio stared at him intently. In short, she declared that she believed in everything he was saying. But she had one condition. She hoped he would let her stay by his side. She promised not to cause trouble, and hearing this, the others rushed to show their loyalty as well. They begged to go with him, claiming they wouldn't even mind acting as a vanguard if necessary. They argued that with so many of them, they could surely lend him a hand. Seeing that everyone was insisting on following him, he gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. They trusted him, and deep down, he decided he wouldn't let them down. However, he warned them beforehand that in this life-or-death situation, things would change. He was the center now, and any order he gave had to be followed unconditionally. He warned them not to blame him if his attitude changed, and after hearing his words, everyone agreed in unison. They were terrified he might change his mind. He checked the time. 3 minutes had already slipped away. And so, he led the group out of the janitor's room and into the unknown. As they walked, he began to explain the next phase of the plan to them. He told them he needed to find a woman named Chu Ting, though he didn't know her exact location. His strategy was simple. Upon entering a new floor, they would shout her name and then search for survivors. To ensure no monsters were hiding among them, they would test each corridor by turning off the lights before entering. In short, we see that their mission had 3 primary objectives. They were to find Chu Ting and search for any other survivors. And, of course, eliminate any monsters they found. He asked if anyone had any doubts. Everyone nodded, signaling that they understood the gravity of the situation. It was then that Su Zio looked at Lin Chun with a hint of hesitation. She asked if they needed weapons, mentioning a man named Li Chao on the first floor who was a sword enthusiast. In his dormitory, she recalled, he likely kept several sharp blades. Upon hearing this, Lin Chin's eyes lit up immediately, a rare moment of genuine interest. He asked which room it was. Su Zio lowered her head to think for a moment before looking back at him. It was dormitory 115, and she offered to lead him there right away. He gave a firm nod, and then turned his attention back to the rest of the group. He told them to stick to the plan he had just laid out, while he, Su Zio, and Zhang Yin moved ahead. The 3 of them would go first to scout the first floor and secure those weapons. He pointed to Zhang Wanchun, Huai, and Chen Jinggao, giving them their specific roles. The 3 of them were tasked with crafting another long-handled daylight lamp for the group. With that settled, he gestured for Zhang Yin to head left and begin inspecting the dormitories. Meanwhile, he and Su Zio turned toward the right to begin their own search. They moved quickly down the hall, though we see they didn't encounter a single survivor. Every door stood wide open, offering grim glimpses of the bloody scenes left behind inside. Still, just to be certain, he called out Chu Ting's name as they passed. He figured that if she heard him, she might be able to come out on her own. Before long, our duo arrived at the entrance of dormitory 115. Inside, they found a standard room designed for 4 people. 3 bodies lay there. Su Zio looked around and headed straight for the wardrobe at the back. She reached into the furthest corner of the closet and pulled out 3 blades to hand to him. The first things he noticed were a Tang sword and a Shu Chun sword. And then, there was an 8-sided Han sword, measuring over 2 meters in length. Initially, he had planned on choosing either the Tang or the Shu Chun blade. But the moment Su Zio passed them to him, his mind changed completely. All 3 were incredibly sharp, but the Tang and Shu Chun felt far too light in his hands. The 8-sided Han sword, however, caught the light with a certain dangerous promise. The Tang sword had a blunt, heavy weight to it, which he estimated at about 5 kilos. He gave it a sudden, experimental turn, and the wardrobe door was instantly sliced in 2. He turned suddenly, and the wardrobe door was sliced in 2. He then handed the Shu Chun sword to Su Zio and set the Tang blade aside for Zhang Yin. He told her to take the Shu Chun to defend herself, but Su Zio refused and handed it right back to him. She suggested giving it to Chen Jinggao instead, noting that he was much more robust than she was. It suited him better, she claimed. He noticed that Su Zio seemed to want to say something else, though she was clearly hesitating. He narrowed his eyes at her. He knew she had called him over for a reason. He told her plainly that if she had something on her mind, she should just say it directly. At his words, Suzuo blushed. She admitted she knew he didn't actually want to act alone. After all, she argued, he would be much safer if he stayed with the rest of the group. However, she hoped he wouldn't treat her like a disposable pawn, the way he seemed to view Qin Jingao and the others. She repeated her hope not to be discarded, pointing out that her intellect could be a genuine asset to him. She reminded him how, just a moment ago, the others had followed his lead under her guidance. She even suggested that if danger arose, she could ensure the others stayed behind of their own volition. Finishing her plea, Suzuo adjusted her glasses and waited anxiously for his response. As she waited, he saw right through her. Despite her grand words, he realized she was simply terrified that his promise to escape was a lie. She was talking in circles because she was desperate to stay close to him, but he chose not to give her an answer just yet. 2 minutes had already passed. He told her they would discuss her physical endurance only once they had made it out alive. Hearing this, Suzuo's face turned an even deeper shade of red. She was about to keep speaking when Zhang Yan's voice suddenly drifted in from outside. He decided it was enough and told her to stop overthinking things. In that moment, Lin Chun made the decision for her. As long as you don't back down, Lin Chun isn't going to let you down. As he was speaking, Zhang Yan walked in, and his eyes lit up the moment he saw the swords in his hands. Wow, so much good gear, he remarked. This sword is for me. He took the tang blade and spun it with practiced skill, his face practically beaming with joy. He tilted his head and offered a small, knowing smile to Suzuo. It was as if he were saying, see, Lin Chun is the one in charge here. He told her she had picked the wrong target, then grabbed Zhang Yan by the shoulder and headed out. After meeting up with the three who were making the lamp, he led them to the 3rd floor to search. The moment they reached the 3rd floor, we hear the faint sound of noises coming from the very last dormitory. Mateo, are you really okay with all that blood on your head? Someone asked. They wondered if they should call emergency services, and then we hear someone finally respond. Ouch, I already told you I'm fine, but my head does hurt a little. He told them to turn off the light first, and hearing this, Lin Chun narrowed his eyes. It was Mateo, the very monster that had fled from the 4th floor earlier. He hadn't expected it to come here, so he quickly arranged for Zhang Yan and the others to search elsewhere. Immediately after, he ran toward the last room and threw the door wide open. Those inside were startled out of their wits and scrambled into the corners. Seeing him enter, Mateo stopped hiding and lunged toward him with arms outstretched. Lin Chun took half a step back and, with a single hand, swung the sword in a sharp horizontal cut. The heavy steel blade sliced through the air and deep into the room. In the very next instant, Mateo's head was sent flying through the air. In less than 5 seconds, he had cleanly decapitated the creature. As it hit the floor, Mateo's body shifted, revealing the true, twisted form of the monster. He had killed an avatar of UGI, bringing his current spark value to 21. With the option to redeem them, he immediately increased his agility to 8 points. At that exact moment, a terrified voice rang out from right beside him. They asked how he could kill someone, and he turned to see 4 survivors looking absolutely petrified. They could barely stand, so to be certain of their nature, he turned off the light to test them. Fortunately, it seemed all 4 of them were still human, for now, at least. Seeing this, he simply turned around and began to make a quick exit. He didn't have time to explain, only noting that the dormitory was far too dangerous. He told them to follow him if they wanted to live, and he had barely finished speaking before the 4 of them let out a cry and went scrambling after him. Outside, he met up with Zhang Yan, who excitedly announced he had just killed a monster all by himself. Lin Chun was pleasantly surprised and asked him what the experience had felt like. Zhang Yan opened his mouth wide, his expression a bit exaggerated as he tried to find the words. His whole body was aching, he explained, but to be honest, it felt really good. He described the sensation of all his muscles feeling tight and pumped with adrenaline. Lin Chun paused for a moment, stunned, and asked if he hadn't noticed anything else. Perhaps a strange sound, for example, or something unusual appearing in his field of vision. Did anything strange appear? No, nothing at all. He simply felt as though his physical strength had increased a little bit. Did killing monsters actually improve one's physical capabilities? It was an incredible thought, yet hearing this, Lin Chun felt a wave of disappointment. It seemed that Zhang Yan hadn't managed to awaken the Tianhua after all. After a brief rest, we see him leading the group further upward. With more people helping, the search became significantly easier. But they had already scoured most of the floors, and there was still no sign of Chu Ting. Even so, he didn't let it discourage him. His own power was steadily increasing, after all. If he couldn't find Chu Ting in the end, he decided he would simply head to room 1104 alone. It was a practical plan, but as they reached the 7th floor, he suddenly came to a halt. He told them to stay quiet, sensing a situation, and everyone behind him immediately fell silent. He swept his flashlight upward and saw several massive figures watching them from above. Seeing this, he gestured for the group to follow and began taking the stairs in great strides. They soon reached the 7th floor, where every single light had been extinguished. Under the beam of his powerful flashlight, he saw the hallway was littered with severed limbs. He frowned, realizing that the people here were likely already dead. He instructed the others to call out a few times to see if Chu Ting was nearby. Following his lead, several of them shouted into the darkness of the 7th floor corridor. but there was no response, so he promptly led them up toward the 8th floor. As they opened the fire door to the 8th floor, everyone suddenly froze in their tracks. Blocking the way behind the door were 2 iron bed frames, wedged tightly into place. Through the gaps in the frames, we can see heavy objects and wooden boards piled high behind them. Zhang Yin tried to give it a shove, but the barricade didn't budge at all. It didn't move an inch, and then, a sudden commotion broke out from the other side of the door. "Hold it steady, hurry. Another ghost is trying to break in. Don't panic, everyone. It's daylight now. If that ghost manages to get inside, we'll take it down together." Hearing this, Lin Shen narrowed his eyes and delivered a powerful kick to the front of the door. The iron frames buckled instantly under the force of his strike. He tore open a gap in the barricade and stepped inside without a second thought. Entering the 8th floor corridor, he found himself facing more than 20 people. Their leader, a man with short hair, approached the door with a look of intense vigilance. "Don't bunch up. Those of you with weapons, get to the front right now. Let's finish this quickly and kill this ghost once and for all." At his command, several men armed with steel pipes stepped forward to confront the intruder. At that same moment, Suzy Zhou and the rest of the group squeezed through the opening. "Calm down, we aren't monsters," Suzy Zhou said, panting as she leaned on Lin Shen's shoulder. "Jian Tong, don't make a mistake here. We all came here with Lin Shen. Let's not fight among ourselves." Though hearing this, Jian Tong only let out a mocking laugh. "Lin Shen, who is that?" Jian Tong sneered, insisting that in this corridor there were only monsters. He questioned how they could have possibly come up, unless it was because of that woman. Hearing this, Lin Shen took a step forward and stood beside Jian Tong, resting his blade on the man's shoulder. He demanded to know who this woman was, and if so many had survived because of her. Faced with the cold steel, Jian Tong raised his hands immediately, a very wise decision, all things considered. "Brother, don't be hasty," he stammered, claiming it was all just a big misunderstanding. Lin Shen flicked his wrist slightly, and the sharp edge left a small scratch on the man's neck. He had no time for nonsense and told him to simply answer the question. What was her name? Jian Tong didn't dare to move a muscle as he revealed that her name was Chu Ting. The moment he heard the name Chu Ting, Lin Shen felt the heavy weight in his heart finally begin to lift. He lowered his sword slowly and asked if the man knew where Chu Ting could be found. Jian Tong noticed the icy look in Lin Shen's eyes and realized it was no longer safe to hide anything. He admitted he didn't know, but said she mentioned looking for something called a node and told them to wait. He claimed to know nothing else, and as Lin Shen listened, a specific thought crossed his mind. The node. It seemed that Chu Ting knew something important about their situation. After that, we see him scan the survivors gathered on the 8th floor. There were about 40 of them, and it was clear that all of this was Chu Ting's handiwork. Then, Jian Tong plucked up his courage and asked if his name was indeed Lin Shen. He suggested they were all human and there was no need for them to be so tense with one another. He mentioned that Tian Jia had said something before leaving, as long as they stayed by the fire door. He explained that as long as they didn't enter the rooms, the ghosts wouldn't be able to possess them. She was supposed to return and save them, so he insisted there was no need for anyone to keep taking risks. It was better, in his view, to simply stay put and wait for Chu Ting to come back for them. As he spoke, we see Jian Tong pull a small object out of his pocket. He claimed the black jade belonged to him, insisting that Sister Ting had given it to him personally. The energy field it emitted was apparently enough to protect all of them, at least for a short while. Lin Shen took the object and rubbed it slightly, noting its cold and smooth texture. Besides a character on the front, the back was engraved with tiny, densely packed letters. It bore the number 09527, revealing that the item was, in fact, man-made. After returning the black jade ring to Jian Tong, Lin Shen gave him a dismissive pat. He told them he was going to find Chu Ting, giving them the choice to stay hidden or follow him. Upon hearing this, Jian Tong shook his head repeatedly. He wasn't going anywhere, and so he decided to stay behind in the safety of the room. He suggested they wait a bit longer, hoping that by the next day, Chu Ting would have returned on her own. Lin Shen didn't bother trying to persuade him further. His reasons for finding survivors weren't exactly noble, after all. His primary goal was simply to ensure the monsters had fewer people to devour. If the monsters couldn't feed, the speed of their evolution would naturally slow down. For the time being, at least, these people were likely out of immediate danger. As for what might happen after 4 in the morning, well, he knew he wouldn't be able to help them then. However, his calm and detached attitude was starting to make Jian Tong feel a bit hesitant. It was at that moment that Su Zio suddenly decided to speak up. He reminded them that they had fought their way up from the very bottom to get here. They needed to find Chu Ting soon, especially since she had already killed over a dozen monsters and knew the way out. Upon hearing this, Jian Tong was visibly startled, and who could blame him, really? He couldn't believe they had already killed so many of Yugi's avatars. And more importantly, he wondered if they truly knew an escape route that even Sister Ting was unaware of. With those thoughts in mind, Jian Tong looked at Lin Shen with newfound determination. He realized that waiting passively for a rescue was far worse than taking the initiative to save themselves. He declared he would go with them, but the others on the 8th floor grew agitated the moment they heard he was leaving. They demanded that if Jian Tong was going to leave, he had to leave the black jade behind for them. They insisted that if he wanted to go, he should go alone and not put the rest of them at risk. Hearing their selfish demands, Jiantong couldn't help but let out a dry, mocking laugh. He reminded them that, in the first place, Sister Ting had found him before anyone else. It was he who had secretly let her into the dormitory at night, which was the only reason they were even there to complain. Secondly, he pointed out that Sister Ting had lent him the black jade as a personal thank you for his help. It had absolutely nothing to do with the rest of them, a fact he made very clear. Seeing that the people on the 8th floor still weren't ready to back down, Lin Shen simply waved his hand. He told Jiantong not to waste any more time with them and signaled that it was time to move out. He ordered Zhang Yin and Chun Juanhao to take up the rear and keep watch. They were to let anyone pass who actually wanted to join them, leaving the rest to their own devices. But if anyone dares to cause trouble, he told them, kill them immediately. He didn't hide the murderous intent in his words and his appearance in that moment. Well, it was more terrifying than a serial killer from a movie. Seeing this, the people on the 8th floor didn't dare say another word, watching as he left with Jiantong. As for Zhang Yin and the other, under his orders, they blocked the hallway with blades in hand. Once they saw everyone was staying put, they backed away and headed up the stairs. Upon reaching the 9th floor, we see him suddenly grow serious. It was because most of the dormitory doors he could see were completely intact. There were only two possibilities. Either the students were tricked into opening them, or the monster opened them after devouring everyone inside. It seemed that, aside from the 8th floor, the higher they went, the more parasitized people there were. Taking in the grim state of the building, Jiantong grabbed his arm. He recalled Sister Ting saying that the parasitism doesn't happen all at once, but rather gradually. The logic was simple. The more people UGI devours, the more energy it obtains. With enough energy, the main body of UGI can release even more avatars to infect humans. Hearing this, Lin Chen's mind raced, wondering if that energy might actually be spirituality. But he didn't dwell on it. Noticing Zhang Yin and Chen Juanhao had caught up, he signaled to everyone. As they moved forward, the ceiling lights suddenly died, plunging the entire 9th floor into darkness. With only a faint light by the fire door where they stood, he instinctively gripped the hilt of his sword. He warned everyone to be careful, suspecting someone had cut the main power on the 1st floor. He told them not to move and to stick to the original plan, which, to be honest, was their only hope. Turn on all the flashlights, he commanded, but don't point them toward. However, before he could even finish his sentence, the sound of a dormitory door creaking open echoed in the distance. Immediately after, a monster with rotting, green and black skin lunged directly toward our group. He quickly raised his tactical flashlight, aiming the beam straight at the creature. In an instant, the monster became a blurred shadow and vanished into a blind spot, leaving the others swallowing hard in fear. They whispered nervously, wondering what to do now and if they should truly keep searching. He reassured them with a steadying pat on the shoulder. The arrow was already on the bow, and there was no turning back now. Deep down, he held on to the hope that Chu Ting might be inside one of these rooms. They had already come this far, and retreating simply wasn't an option anymore. With that settled, he raised his hand to check the time. It was already 3:50. He immediately began giving instructions to everyone, specifically to Chun Juanhao and Zhang Yin. You two take 3 people and search the left side, he directed. He ordered those with knives to the front, while those carrying the flashlights were to stay behind them. Then he turned to Erhua and Yin Wanchen, telling them they would be coming with him to the right. He told them to take the long-handled fluorescent lamps with them. He made sure they had them ready, then told Su Zio and the others to stay back and rest. If a situation arose, they were to be ready to provide support with the lights. Having said his piece, he switched on his flashlight and began following the trail of the fleeing monster. But at that moment, the voice of Jiantong stopped him in his tracks. Lin Chun, wait, she said firmly. I'm going with you as well. He led the 3 of them toward the right hallway, where, not far off in dormitory 903, the monster suddenly burst out once again. It seemed ready to pounce on them, but under the glare of the light, it turned into a shadow and retreated back into the room. This happened several times, and we can see the monster was becoming extremely furious with every failed attempt. Seeing this, Lin Chen slowed his pace, refusing to rush in blindly like a fool. Instead, during the brief intervals, he used his flashlight to check the nearby dorms for any other monsters hiding in ambush. He had no intention of being attacked from both sides, while Jiantong, noticing his caution, pressed close to his side. She whispered, asking what was happening, as the situation was starting to feel like complete madness. She suggested they turn back, convinced that staying there was simply too dangerous for anyone's liking. Jiantong wanted to keep insisting, but Lin Chun, taking advantage of the moment the monster retreated again, moved forward. He advanced with long, steady strides, following the creature's trail closely. They reached the entrance of dormitory 903, and under the beam of the wide-spectrum flashlight, something changed. The creature could no longer maintain its monstrous form, stabilizing instead into the shape of a completely naked student. Upon seeing them, the boy looked as though he wanted to lunge forward in a desperate, suicidal final stand. His stomach was distended and grotesque, and as the light hit him, the scene became truly horrific to behold.